It's absolutely a global network. I mean, there's almost no area of coral reef that we don't have some sort of connection to. We've got sort of institutional partnerships, groups like WorldFish and the Wildlife Conservation Society. And then we've also got former students of ours that are now in government agencies or NGOs or in research institutes of their own.
So the Centre of Excellence is a really strong partner, obviously. We work together on how to manage coral reef fisheries in collaborative ways. The Centre is a provider of excellent research. It's cutting edge, it's independent, it's sometimes a bird's eye view of what's happening, and it allows us to critically reflect on where we're at, where we're going, and how to improve.
You need institutions like WorldFish who are really engaged with implementing the research. And so we have this sort of two-way partnership where we can raise the level of science that's being done, but they can also raise our ability to have impact on the ground. And then we've also got community partnerships where we've got communities that we've been working directly with. I've been doing research in fishing communities since the late 1990s, going back to the same villages for over 20 years. So we were able to track the changes over time and understand how management had been changing and what that means for the environment. That's something that you can't get from just taking a snapshot approach to doing research. That can only be done with long-term funding like we've had.
We've been studying shocks and surprises in coastal communities for a very long time to try to understand how to build resilience to change, but COVID-19 was a completely different ballgame.
When COVID hit, we started to wonder what was happening in the communities we work with for a long time, because they are quite dependent on their coral reefs and quite vulnerable to shocks like this. We started developing some interviews that could be done over the phone. We followed up with them every few months to see what had changed in terms of the COVID restrictions that were in place and how they were coping with those disruptions.
Fishers that we work with in Papua New Guinea and Kenya were completely cut off from markets, and so they were unable to sell fish, they were unable to get food to feed their families.
Because now you can't go out and fish at night because of the nighttime curfew, then it becomes very difficult for them to continue fishing. There was also the cessation of movement, so they couldn't really find a place where they could sell their fish.
This project really came about through the connections that the centre already had with these places. We couldn't have done this research without having worked in those communities, but also being connected to people on the ground.
Researchers from the ARC Center of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies have also supported this project financially. So they have mobilized resources, and we are able to make it a long-term study rather than a one-off study.
The range of different measures that were put in place by governments, as well as the impacts of having to cope with a disease itself, meant that lots of different parts of food systems and other aspects of life were affected all at the same time. Things related to climate change can also cause these cascading, multiple simultaneous effects. We might be able to take lessons from how COVID has changed communities and how people are dealing with that to move forward to look at how people can adapt to the multiple effects of climate change.
We've done research on climate change adaptation in a Papua New Guinean island atoll where they're on the front lines of climate change. And we found that households that had connections with other households that had undertaken some sort of adaptive response to climate impacts were more likely to have done so as well. There's sort of this social influence effect going on through people's social connection. Currently, many adaptation programs across the globe are focusing on building assets. So these are things like building infrastructure or savings. What our research shows is that a broader set of factors play a role. Things like learning, social networks, and even power dynamics. So our research can inform better policies and programs that can potentially help to build more resilient coastal communities in the future that are better able to respond to climate change and other shocks like COVID-19.